My guest today is Steve Bassett, one of the very first registered UFO lobbyists in Washington, D.C. He's also the head of the Paradigm Research Group and the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, bringing Hollywood and disclosure together. Here's some highlights from today's interview.
That's not exactly accurate. Okay, at which point he informs them that, yeah, they got a craft at Roswell. Okay, so that is one of many examples where this stuff is turned up in various films. David Grush was internally known. His whole story was well known within government. The term close observer means anyone who has come into close proximity to an unidentified anomalous phenomena or non-human intelligence. So Tim Burchett, who had been speaking on this issue, right, which is also helping to advance the disclosure process because he is a sitting member of the House of Representatives. Tim Burchett had been very aggressive on this issue, had gone on a number of shows. He seized on the Grush situation immediately as we can get a hearing on this. To confirm, I think, any reasonable person why we're on the 1 yard line, as this bill is going to sit there for months being read by people all over the world. In terms of John heading on over to the Department of Defense and backing up a U-Haul truck and loading it up with UFO files, that was never going to happen. And let me be clear, disclosure from a president of the United States is absolutely on hold. That doesn't mean we're not still on the 1 yard line. We are, all right? And so...
we're running out of downs here.
And the closer we get, the more likely another head of state may say, hey, I'm jumping in here. But if another head of state does that now, we are ready. We've got everything pretty much we need to deal with the demand of several 100 million Americans. I want everything. I want it tomorrow. I want it absolutely clean. I want everybody that doesn't do this correctly to go to jail, whatever. Right?
Sure.
They are basically ready for that, even if Xi Jinping comes forward. But we still need that legislation. Because in the minds of an awful lot of people, including media, he just formalized the presence of non-human tech, non-human bodies. That essentially confirms Roswell. It confirms we're not alone.
All right, without further ado, vetters, Steve Bassett. All right, vetters, look who we have on the show. Steve Bassett is back. Y'all wanted it. Y'all really enjoyed the first conversation I had with Steve. So he is back, and we are going to kind of pick up where we left off, but we've also got some new topics we are going to want to discuss. And Steve definitely has something that he wants to discuss. So I'm happy we could reunite. Steve, welcome to the show, man.
It is a pleasure, Patrick. You got a great show. I'm a big fan.
Awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed the last conversation. The vetters loved it. Really enjoyed. People are still talking about it in my Discord to this day. So we're gonna go back at it. You know, one thing we didn't get to cover, Steve, that I just were pressed for time last time, and I know we have a bigger topic we want to get into, this UAP legislation, but before we get to that, I find something you're a part of to be quite fascinating, which is this Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. I love this. I love this sort of idea. So just maybe talk a little bit more about what this is, and because I've got some questions, just a couple questions. So yeah, tell us a little bit about this.
Well, there is a very high-end, top of the top version of this that was created way back by some very famous, very important, powerful people in Hollywood, namely Norman Lear and his wife. Norman Lear died recently at 101.
Yeah,
let's shoot for that. And his wife Lynn is still alive. But she and some other friends of theirs created an organization that still exists today, and it's high level, big time. It's called the Environmental Media Association, EMA, and it was set up in late 1980s for good cause. The environmental movement was really coming into its own. It was growing, and there was a lot of concerns about a lot of issues. That's still the case, though it's been heavily politicized. And so they came up with the idea that the issues, the film industry, of which obviously includes television and everything else, that's where people learn what's going on. I mean, Either they learn about it in fiction movies, or they learn about it in narrative fiction, or they learn about it in docs. But there's huge money, untold hundreds of millions of dollars are spent creating content for people. And therefore, they felt that the film industry had a certain responsibility to possibly help the world, because obviously the film industry, our movies go around the world. That major pictures always have a higher gross out of the United States, foreign gross, than the domestic. To get the right message out there, to be able to get the right information and provide information that maybe is not being covered. So they created the Environmental Media Association. They held a huge, very fancy awards dinner to start it off. Some of the absolute top people in Hollywood came, studio heads, major people, and they off it went with a very substantial amount of funding, not surprisingly, and it still exists to this day. And you can go find it, Environmental Media Association, and it has attached to it a huge number of Hollywood stars and so forth. And so it has done its job over the last 30 years. It is embedded. Got something like 5 billion messages of one kind or other, notices, or some huge number, to help, again, educate the world regarding the environmental issues, which ultimately we're all going to deal with. And that's great, and it still exists. Well, the gentleman that was the publicist of that in the very earliest days, who was involved in, and still is a publicist in Hollywood, based in Hollywood, is a gentleman by the name of Dan Harari. And he obviously was involved in publicizing this event all those years ago. And so 30-some years go by, and he runs into me at a conference up in, I think it was San Mateo, I think it was UFO Con. And we just chatted a little bit, and he mentioned that he was a Hollywood publicist. And I said, that's interesting. Let's talk. And so we got together at Factor's Deli not long after that and sat down, and I was curious, what he might want to do. I needed a publicist, to be honest with you, badly. I've always needed a publicist. And he immediately, before the pastrami sandwiches were even delivered, he looked at me and said, I have a project. I said, well, what is it? He says, we need to create the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. And I said, okay, what's that? And then he told me about the Environmental Media Association. Well, what was interesting about that as well was that, and this is last year, this is 2024, or 2023, is that 10 years ago, 10 years before that, I had a similar idea, but on a much more limited scale. I was operating out of Marina del Rey and working on I'd gotten some funding to create what eventually became the citizen hearing on disclosure, the mock congressional hearing held at the National Press Club in 2013. Major project, and had some funding. And I was staying at the studio of my partner, who was providing logistic support and so forth, and production support. And I was staying there. We had a big studio floor. So I launched what I called the ET Media Group, and once a month we had lists. My partner was involved in the business, had a substantial list, so we were inviting anybody that wanted to come, no charge, come on down and let's talk about this subject. And usually we had somebody that would speak, and so the idea was to draw people in the industry to come in and learn about this subject, or people that are interested to come in a safe place where they could talk. Because I knew that ultimately the film industry, that is, the world film industry is huge, but there's kind of a center there in Los Angeles County, highest density perhaps of film production, that eventually this massive industry was going to be critical in the disclosure process and the post-disclosure world. And so we had a number of meetings that went on for about 10 months. That's where I met Thomas Jane for the first time, who was in the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. But at the time, 2013, it just, in the basis I was operating from, it didn't really develop into too much, and eventually it ended. That at 10 years. So when he says, I want to create the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, instantly I'm going, oh yeah. That's exactly what I do. Except he had been a publicist in Hollywood for 40 some years. had huge numbers of contacts, knew the way around. He was a publicist. And so he could do it right. And so we immediately decided to launch this entity, bootstrapped with virtually no money. He and I put up all the initial money, and it wasn't much. He more than I, but it was a bootstrap. And the idea was to create an organization that was going to help the film industry in every level, in every way, get the messages out that are going to have to get out, not only about the disclosure process underway, but of course, everything that has to take place in the post-disclosure world. Now, it's 10 years has gone by, and the potential for getting people in this industry involved was obviously at a different level altogether. And so we launched the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. And the fundamental concept is this. It is a 501c3 nonprofit networking entity. Its job is simple. Its job is to make it easy as possible for people in the industry and people in the UAP ET world, the researchers, the activists, some of which are also in the film business, but they're not in the, they do content, to make it easy for them to network together, to find each other, and then do projects, whatever they are, documentary, fiction, narrative fiction, whatever, on this subject, and get the message right. Because, and this has not been the case in general, when high-level projects got done in Hollywood on this subject, they would not get in touch with the people in my world, your world, and say, look, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Hire them as consultants. No. They just, because our world had been stigmatized and had been undermined. And the two worlds have been kept apart by the truth embargo. And now the truth embargo was ending. And so we wanted to take advantage of that and say, okay, let's get together. So we launched the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance on November the 3rd of last year at a fancy dinner at Musso and Frank, one of the high-end restaurants. I forget how many people we had, 18. And that was the beginning. Now, since then, we've now grown to 160 members. Oh, wow. We do not, this is not a commercial entity. We do ask the founding members to pay a fee, a 1-year membership fee. Though for the first year we did not do that, but we're doing that now. We have to have funds to operate, but we're not a commercial entity. We don't sell stuff. We don't take part in deals. We don't get pieces of the action. None, zero. But everybody connected to it, they can then make the deals. They can make films. They can get the message out. And if they make a lot of money from that, God bless them. That's great. All right. So here's our structure. We have a large board, not so much because we need a large board, but because the board is of individuals who are very committed, that are like the ambassadors for the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. And I think we have now 18 board members. Then we have an executive committee that really runs this thing. Okay. And after that, we have the founding members. Now, we have founding members on the film industry side. We call those Hollywood founding members. And we have founding members on the UAP side. We call those UAP founding members. And there are some people that really have a foot in both camps. And so they got to pick one. Which one is the most appropriate? Underneath the founding members are supporting members. Anyone that provides funding of any kind to us, because it supports it by funding it, they're listed in the supporting members. And underneath that, we have subscribers. No charge, nothing. You can subscribe and get newsletters and find out what's going on. Underneath that, we have affiliates. Underneath that, we have supporting members or organizations, entities that are providing funding, and we are listing them and their logo as a supporting member. Underneath that are affiliates. Right? And so that is the structure of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. It is now 161 strong. We have at least one Oscar winner. We're working on a second. And we have held one event. We have another one coming up in September 22, which will be advertised on the site, I think, for people to bring friends and whatever, and listen to some cool stuff, get introduced. And it is succeeding without question. Things are happening. Deals are being done. I'm aware of that. And it's only going to become more important as we get closer to disclosure.
So this is interesting. So is the idea to okay, network, bring people together, and then they influence, these creative projects with facts about the UFO topic, or what, or different theories, or does that
Well,
make sense? Like, or what is it exactly? Or if the production has questions, hey, what historical references are for crashes? What could we do to make it look real, or things like that? Or
let me say it this way. The people who have been addressing this issue during the age of the truth embargo, which is still underway,
yeah,
journalists, researchers, activists, filmmakers, contactees,
yeah,
right? All of them are very talented people. They've
sure,
written a couple thousand books. They've made hundreds of documentaries. They've researched thousands and thousands of cases. But they all have one thing in common. They're all in an intellectual ghetto created by their own government, beginning in 1947. That
love
says,
that.
well, it's great. You got some talent. You're good. You can write, whatever. But there's no ETs here. And so you're wasting your time. All right. You're a joke. Right. And the skeptics feasted on that. And so
Sure,
they ghettoized these people. They isolated them so they could not get the funding. They could not get but instead they still did it. They did the best they could. But the big, how would you say, institutions, all the colleges and universities, all the philanthropic organizations, not there for us. So this
yeah,
is the way it was. And so the talent, the information, and the history is in the hands of those people, not in the hands of the producers in Hollywood, the studio owners. Now, there are some people that are very interested, and I'm not saying there aren't people knowledgeable in the hardcore content industry that is based in the Los Angeles County, but in many cases, they don't use that knowledge because they didn't want to be connected to the issue. They were doing very well making fictional films about extraterrestrials, over 600, that have generated between 100 and 200 billion dollars in total revenues.
oh
Well,
yeah,
that's changing. And so it's about this. The people who have the ability to make incredible content with
yeah,
fantastic technology and CGI, who have the assets to fund huge projects. All right,
huh,
we're making it as easy as possible for them to connect with the people that know the issue, that have studied it, have done the research, that have written the books, right? But really didn't have access to them. We're bringing these two groups together so that the messages, the content, however, whatever form it's going to be going out, well, going forward forever, is going to reflect reality. Now, that doesn't mean there won't continue to be plenty of fictional movies and sci-fi movies about ETs. I get that. It's all right.
sure,
But if you're talking about the real issue, whether it's contact, whether it's the tampering with our nuclear weapons, any aspect of the phenomena, if you're talking about the real thing, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is designed to help them get it right and make money doing it. Because if you don't make money from these efforts, you cannot continue to do these efforts, right? Right.
sure,
And
sure.
in the intellectual ghetto of ufology, sort of a meme developed that, like, it's been ridiculed and everything, and we got to be careful. We're called tinfoil hat wearers, so we can't make any money because people will think, oh, we're making it up to make money. Well, the government loved that. Sure, don't make money. Just do it out of your pocket. Go bankrupt. We don't care, right? No more, right? So if one of my
Yeah.
colleagues does a documentary film with a major producer in this town and it makes $20 million, fantastic, because that documentary, at least the UAP participant in that, is going to take that money and probably make even more docs and more content as the way it should be. So that's the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.
Um, no, I find that interesting. Like, I remember a story about Tim Taylor, who is in Diana Pasulka's book, as Tyler D,
Yes.
taking out to that secret crash site and then saying to Diana, "Oh, looks familiar, right? Well, this was used in the X Files." So, like, do you know of any other instances like that where real, either places or people or facts are secretly hidden in some TV shows or movies?
Hang on just a second. I got to get my I got some power into my phone. I'm gonna get it done. Hang on. Forgive me.
Don't
Right.
worry.
I got a giant cord here. Here we go. Look, it would not surprise me at all if if that has happened. It's okay. The issues, some of the real issues are alluded to in various movies, which is great. Okay, though again, usually not without consulting any of my colleagues. But so
But what are some of these like specific? Because that's the first question people are going to have. Okay, well, what are they? What are some
well,
examples?
let me give you one example and then
Okay,
extrapolate from there. Okay.
okay.
One of the and I have the poster right around the corner here. It's a trilogy that goes with these two.
Okay.
And the movie Independence Day, the first one,
Okay.
very good movie.
Yeah.
Okay, love that movie. Okay, so the Independence Day is about an alien invasion. All right, fine. And it's and so in the movie there is a key moment that takes place on Air Force One as they're fleeing, right, the destruction of Washington D.C. and New York and everything else, right? The ETs are really laying waste. And Jeff Goldblum, who's the protagonist, and you had Bill Pullman, I think, who was I think it was Pullman that was the president, and then you had this wonderful actor that was the father of Goldblum. So they're on, and they're chatting about things, and it turns out that they're going to be going to Area 51. All right, that's where they're going to take the plane because there's some sort of underground facility there, and that's when Jeff Goldblum's character, his father, pipes up and goes, "Oh yeah. That's where the Roswell vehicle was kept. Right, that's where they took it." In which case, the president looks at them and goes, "No, that's all nonsense. That's ridiculous."
That's a pretty good impression, by the way, of Judd Hirsch.
Yeah,
that's not bad.
That's
pretty good.
And so then they turn to walk out of the room, and the Secretary of Defense is still standing there, and he makes one of the great lines. He says, "That's not exactly accurate." Okay, at which point he informs them that they got a craft at Roswell. Okay, so that is one of many examples where this stuff is turned up in various films. Now, this happened to be a major blockbuster movie that made hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, you ready for the punchline on this? That kind of makes the point that I was making earlier and why the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance was created. Here's the punchline. This movie was really a giant recruitment movie for people to join the Air Force and the military, gung-ho, 4th of July, okay, defend the country and everything else. And, like just about every Tom Cruise movie ever made.
Sure.
So naturally, the Department of Defense was more than happy to cooperate. And I don't know what they provide, but, stock footage of jets and things, or maybe actual jets, aircraft carriers, whatever the hell you need. If they can provide it, they will. Because these films, oftentimes, are just really great promotions for Americans' power. Well, at some point, somebody in the Pentagon read the script, and when they saw that Area 51 in Roswell was going to be mentioned, they said, "You have to take that out, or we will not continue to cooperate with you on this film." And the producers said, "Sorry, Charlie, we're going to keep it in." And they just sort of made do without the help of the Department of Defense. This is a story that I've heard from sources which I think are true. If it's not true, let the government come forward and say otherwise. Probably happened in other films. So there you go. So that stuff turns up. All right. It turns up here and there and whatever. These people know.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, J. Allen Hynek was on helped with Close Encounters, right? With Steven Spielberg.
J. Allen Hynek definitely did. Steven Spielberg is a key figure here. I believe that he's known about the ET presence going way, way back. And he's made a decision that, fine, but it's not my job to inform the public of this. But he's made some of the most important films, which certainly have helped the disclosure process. Contact, without question, helped the disclosure process. All right. Close Encounters, I'm sorry. Contact is
Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah. Close Encounters of the Third Kind clearly helped the disclosure process without question. And Spielberg promoted, let me see, Well, he also made the 20-hour series Taken, which is
Yeah.
really kind of a narrative fiction of the whole thing without getting into specifics, but it addresses contact, abduction, and so forth. This is all the way back in 2002. So he has done a lot. Has he done as much as I would like? No. Is he welcome to join the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance? Oh, yes, yes, yes. Please, 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 please.
Well, he's got that new movie coming out, right? The Dish, I believe it's called.
He's already announced, and it's obviously a big deal. When you announce a movie 2 years in advance, that means it is a big deal. So sure. I believe that Steven Spielberg has calculated that this next movie is going to hit the screens in the post-disclosure world. We're all going to be in a post-disclosure world where the entire world knows we're not alone. And that's so I think he has big plans for this movie. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons it's been announced literally 2 years in advance.
Wow. I have not heard that take yet, Steve, and I like it. Okay, that's interesting. So you feel this movie may come from the viewpoint of we're already in disclosure?
One of the messages that I'm getting out about the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance and anybody that's listening is that if you have a sense that if you at one level or another know this is real, then you have to understand formal confirmation of it is coming.
Sure.
And formal confirmation of the ET presence, which is meaning it's from the President of the United States, either because the president went first or the president had to follow some other heads of state that went first, whatever.
Sure. Sure.
And that's the most profound event in human history. And it's going to develop a worldwide obsession with this issue unmatched in the history of the human race. And if you can make content, if you're ready, right, to make content that's relevant and important, you will have a lot of eyeballs watching that content, which means you're going to make a great deal of money, but we would like the content to be accurate. And leading up to disclosure, which we're not there yet, any content that you can create that's accurate and so forth is just going to help it along. And so the film industry is coming alive on this issue. I assure you, the film industry is filled with geniuses. A lot of people, throw shade at Hollywood. Yeah, it's a bunch of people. They're pretty, walk around. They don't understand that the people that are making these major projects are absolute geniuses. And I assure you, they know there's an ET presence. That doesn't mean they're going to do anything about it. Doesn't mean they're going to make a film about it. It just means they know it's true. But there is an embargo, and they don't necessarily want to be an activist on that. I get it. That's all changing. So they're coming around. And so every day, somebody else in this business kind of goes, this is going to be a big deal. What can I do? Look, J.J. Abrams took on a production called UFO that was in trouble and finished it off, put it out there. It was a documentary series about this issue.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Highest series in the history of Showtime.
That was great.
Steven Spielberg followed with Encounters, another documentary series. So they are coming on board, and there's more to follow. Obviously, I would like gentlemen like Abrams and like Steven Spielberg to draw on my colleagues and the people in this field that have carried all the water and done this work for all these decades, and use them as much as possible and reward them accordingly. But that's their business. I mean, I'm not going to tell them how to run their business, but that's our hope.
I get it. That would be cool to have these movies have UFO researchers on. They do it for all kinds of different aspects of filmmaking, right? Where they bring on experts in whatever the thing is and have them there, on set. If it's a police movie, they got officers ready to help with how they hold a gun and how they do that, right? So I could see that being the case. I find that interesting. Who are some other figures in Hollywood that, like Spielberg and Abrams, like who are some other people that you feel really know what's going on and kind of support this?
Well, I want to be careful here.
You don't want to out anybody, right?
If you go to HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org, check out the Hollywood founding members, all of them, and there's some pretty talented people there. I mean,
you said Thomas Jane. I love Thomas Jane. He's been in some of my favorite movies. Hung was awesome. I even watched his directorial efforts. I used to listen to his director's commentary, which I don't think very many people have probably ever listened to, but I did. I really always liked that guy so much. He's such a creative person. He was in The Expanse, obviously, and now, like, what is his involved? He seems very. I've seen him on a couple interviews. He seems very involved in the topic.
Well, I am proud to be able to say Thomas is now a good friend of mine. He's jumped in with both feet.
Wow.
He's a member of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. He gave several lectures at the recent Contact in the Desert conference. He's co-written a book, a very high-level, sophisticated book that gets into this issue, which eventually is going to get published. He's all over this thing. Okay, so he's a very strong example of someone willing to get into this. Sure. But again, rather than, outside of the people in the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, go check them out. You don't need me to tell you who they are. But outside of that, I mentioned Abrams, I mentioned Spielberg for obvious reasons. I mean, they just made series, and Spielberg's history is known. But in terms of others, I don't want to go there too much. What I want to say is what I said earlier, and I think this is safe. Okay. I watch a lot of movies. I've watched thousands. That's why I love movies. Have a PhD in comparative sociology. I got 1 degree, and that was it. But they're geniuses, and you know it when you see it. Watch Interstellar, genius. Oppenheimer, genius. Okay. Yeah. By the way, Nolan is somebody. I would give anything for a lunch with that gentleman. The point is, these are geniuses that are powerful and wealthy, and they have all kinds of connections. People lining up to tell them special stuff, to get their good grace or whatever.
Sure.
My theory is that these individuals, these absolute geniuses, particularly the ones that are dealing in the science fiction area, right? But even others, they know there's an ET presence, and they have been tipped off. Does that mean they've been given a tour of underground facilities? No. As the CIA giving them a briefing. You don't have to have a briefing with the CIA to figure it out. It's pretty damn obvious. They're flying all over the place above us. And so they know. But far be it for me to say how to run their careers or what topics to get into and so forth. That's a choice they make. And so I'm going to leave it at that. But just kind of know, when you're that smart, that wealthy, that powerful, the idea that somebody is not going to kind of tip you off and go, the ET thing is real. I mean, they're here, believe me. And that's true for billionaires like Musk and all the other ones, right? Who were throwing all their money around and kicking ass. I get it. If you're a billionaire, people line up to tell you stuff. And so does Elon Musk know there's an ET presence? You bet he does, which makes the comments he makes kind of a little interesting and awkward, but that's his business. Just because doesn't mean you have to proclaim it, doesn't mean you can't even ignore it or even state against it. That's their business.
Elon Musk also runs the world's biggest rocket company, so we couldn't resist asking him about aliens. Of course we did.
A lot of people ask me, where are the aliens? And I think if anyone would know about aliens on Earth, it would probably be me.
I would think.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with space stuff.
The day will come when maybe you'll get an understanding of how many people know about it and how many people on the Capitol Hill knew about it, how many staffers, how many members of Congress, and it will utterly astound you. People will be going, are you kidding me? Well, then why didn't they do something?
Sure.
Truth embargo. It's that simple.
Why haven't they made like the most just epic, basic UFO movie, right? Where it's basically the basic UFO story, right? Of crashed UFO, government cover up, reverse engineering, that's just focused on that. I don't know.
They have
they? What movie? What am I not thinking?
There have been hundreds of documentaries on this.
Not documentaries. I'm saying like a Hollywood movie, right? It's always, you got Alien, you got you name all the popular ones. It's always this other, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I love all the movies that have ever come out. For the most part, I watch anything with aliens. To be honest with you, but just that basic UFO story. Like, do you think they have avoided that, and pushed that off, made the right calls? Like, nope, we can't tell that real story.
Well, are you talking about fiction, documentaries, or narrative fiction?
narrative fiction.
Okay, narrative fiction. There's been some of that, and Taken is the classic example. In the right around the year 2000, maybe a little before, I believe that a lot of very important people, including Steven Spielberg, thought that this thing was going to break. And one of the reasons I believe they thought that was because of the Rockefeller Initiative that took place during the first term of President Bill Clinton. Went on from 93 to 96. And Rockefeller was helping to fund efforts to get information to the White House and meet and encouraging the president to be bold and go get the UFO files, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think he sort of sent John Podesta, put that job, handed that to John Podesta, who actually did some things about declassifications and so forth. But in terms of John heading on over to the Department of Defense and backing up a U-Haul truck and loading it up with UFO files, that was never going to happen.
Do you think there might be aliens?
I'm actually, I think there are two issues there. One is, are there aliens? And two, have we been visited or visited recently by aliens? Right. I think on the former, it seems inconceivable there aren't aliens.
Right.
On the latter, that's what the quest for opening up and getting the government to take it seriously. Other governments have done so. They've both looked and reviewed their files. They've set up, these are small teams of people to say, okay, well, if we see something, let's examine it. Let's rather than being embarrassed, ashamed, and treating it as something that has to go into black programs everywhere. Let's let the public in on what we know.
But you were,
that's all I've championed, and I stand by it. And I think it would be good. And I think there's actually a lot of public interest in the phenomena in doing that. And I got to tell you, I meet a lot of politicians, people in Washington and others who say, I'm with you, but I can't say so.
But you were White House Chief of Staff. You had a very high security clearance. So recognize you can't tell us anything about classified information. Did what you see change your estimation of the probability? In the last 10 years, has your estimation of the probability that we've been visited by aliens changed at all?
He means, have you seen the book?
I think nothing I saw in the government changed my estimation of that.
And so the Rockefeller Initiative lasted for 3 years, and a lot of people inside the government knew about it. Not too many in the public did, because there was just no coverage at all. It wasn't like it was classified. It just was no coverage. Nothing. Washington Post, Washington Times, New York Times, nothing. So, but a lot of people knew about it, including John Podesta, who was in the middle of it. And so that ends. Clinton goes on to his second term. He doesn't revisit the issue, primarily because he was under relentless attack, and they finally really got him with the Lewinsky situation. And so he was pinned down. And so it kind of static. And then his term ends, and the Democrats thought surely that Al Gore was going to win. And that would have been kind of an extension of the Clinton administration. And the prospects that issue might be engaged were high, but he didn't win. Bush wins, but the issue was alive. And so between the time that Clinton left office and October of 2002, this is not long, several things happened. One,
we had 9/11.
Well, yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, of course. But in terms of our issue, one, Podesta decided to still engage it, right? He was still backing it. He was meeting with people. He was talking with people, right? People like Leslie Kean. And something was being put together by Podesta. At the same time, Spielberg made a decision that he was going to put out a major series. Again, one of the early series, right before the massive streaming thing gets going.
Oh yeah.
How long it was in the work,
series.
I don't know. But it's 20 hours, okay, and it's called Taken.
Yeah, Taken.
Now, and this was all coordinated. And so here's how it went down. Out of nowhere, I learned that some sort of organization was being put together that was going to address this issue at a high level, like I couldn't, right? I registered as a lobbyist in 96. I think I had 20 cents in my pocket. And so I didn't have any connections. I just put a flag in and said, okay, let's see where I can go with this. Okay, I didn't have those kind of resources, but Spielberg does and others. And so they decided to put an organization. They actually approached me about being involved. The interview did not go well, and I'll take that on me. So others were put it together, and they announced this organization in October of 2002 at the National Press Club. I was there. I was in the audience. And this was the announcement of the Coalition for Freedom of Information, which was, but the information they're talking about is information about the UAP issue. And so they announced a director, a publicist, legal, all that stuff, everything that I would have loved to have done if I had come into the field, I don't know, with $300,000 or $400,000 in the bank. And so they set this up and they launched it with an official press conference. That press conference was announced, it was opened. He wasn't part of the organization, but it was opened by John Podesta. And that is when he made the statement about it's time for the American people to know the truth. And this video has been up all these years. It's been seen millions of times. The full video of his presentation seems to be lost. Maybe we'll find it. It only lasted about 8 minutes, but there's a key section where he talks about the people have a right to know and so forth. I was stunned when I heard this. I'm sitting there, what? And so this is fantastic. They're going to be going after the issue. They got high legal. Well, the publicist was John Podesta's brother. I mean, it was his brother's firm. They had a high-level K Street lawyer, and I'm going, this is it. This is everything I would love to do if I wasn't just Steve.
I think it's time to open the books on questions that have remained in the dark, on the question of government investigations of UFOs. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law.
So wonderful. And then guess what? At the same time that is happening, Spielberg announces that he is launching Taken. And so what happened was the Coalition for Freedom of Information was announced at a press conference October 22 of 2002. And just a few weeks later, the Washington premiere, that had already been a New York premiere, the Washington premiere of Taken was held at the Reagan building, right? With all of the usual people, including, I think, Podesta there, with waiters with white gloves walking around with silver plates full of the best hors d'oeuvres I've ever had. And so I think they showed at least one of the episodes, right? And then they spoke about it at the Reagan building just a few weeks later. So you see what's going on here? It didn't take a genius to figure out that Spielberg, Podesta, and others thought that there were things going on behind the scenes that made them think this may be about to break. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because Taken is essentially a 20-hour narrative series about the issue in which they try to tell you a lot of what's going on using narrative fiction and characters, not the real thing. It's not a documentary, but it is loaded with narrative fiction. All right. Okay. Now, and there's been other that has turned up here and there, right? The Walton movie, that was a narrative fiction. Christopher Walken played Walton. So, but when it comes to documentaries, when it comes to hard, heavily funded documentaries, Hollywood has not done it until recently. And that was those series by Abrams and Spielberg. There has never been a documentary on this subject that has been put up on the big screen.
I agree Why
And
not?
by that, I mean for the full boat, not renting a couple of theaters. I'm talking
No,
about
no.
never happened.
Wide release, thousands of theaters, right? Yeah, I'm with you.
And it would have made money, right? They would have made money.
100%,
They
100%.
had a perfect example.
I think the phenomena would have made a ton of money if that was put in theaters. James Fox's documentary.
Well, it was supposed to go in theaters, and it got nailed because of COVID. James was on the verge of making history with the first doc that was going to get theatrical distribution, and COVID took it away. COVID has done that to a lot of things, but they had a perfect example of the. And somebody say, "Well, they can't make money." Blah 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 blah. And I'm going, "Are you kidding me?" Right? The documentaries that need to be made about this are basically political docs. If you're talking about the disclosure process. And so can a political doc make money? Let's talk about Fahrenheit 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
Michael Moore.
Yeah, Michael
2000 and whatever the hell, right?
Yeah.
And $7 million. $7 million to make that documentary. It has made, as of today, over $400 million in the modern day. And you don't think that the Hollywood guys don't know that? And so the idea that a political doc can't make money, are you kidding me? And the subject of Fahrenheit 9/11 was basically George Bush's election and the fact that Michael Moore didn't like George Bush, George W. Bush.
I think with streaming, it ruins all that, though, right? Like trying to get documentaries in theaters now with streaming. Jeez.
I agree, but an awful lot of years went by before the streaming came on.
That's a good point.
No doc, right?
Sure. You're right.
And so
You're right.
And the reason I believe for this is simple. And I'm happy to be chastised by any mogul in town that thinks you're full of it, Bassett, is this. They have made between $100 and $200 billion with fictional movies about ETs. I mean, it's a gold mine. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And they have always known if they were to put serious money behind a doc, like, hire James Fox, give him 15 million, whatever. If they were to do that, they would irritate the United States government and the Department of Defense.
That's
and they just didn't need that grief. Why would you want to mess up a good thing by going political on this issue? And so they have stood down. I'm not, look, who am I to tell people how to spend their money and how to do that? I'm simply saying that's what it did, right? I'm not angry, but I'm not shy about pointing out the truth embargo is built on 1,000 decisions like that. But that's about to change. They are almost unleashed, and so soon the genius of these people, the power of their technology, their resources, whether it makes it into a full distribution doc on the big screen is less significant because now the streaming situation is even more powerful. But the point that I have made for many years, the reason it was important to me to get a doc like James Fox's doc up on those big screens, because when people go to a theater and that information is on a giant screen that stretches from one side to the other, it is powerful. It is saying, this is important. This is important. It's in this big theater, right? And that was not something that the government wanted to see happen. You're going to watch it on that little TV. Okay, watch it on a computer maybe, but don't see it promoted in a big theater on IMAX, for God's sakes. And so it's a little bit of a thing with me, but I'm over it. I'll be fine.
Yeah, you're over it. No, that's very interesting for sure. Well, look, let's move on to, I think, a bigger topic that you definitely want to talk about, which I do too. And I think to start us off, I have this question. I think it will lead into the topic. So the 1-year anniversary of David Grush's testimony, along with Ryan Graves and David Fravor, just passed. 1 year. I'm curious, what do you think has been done about Grush's claims? What hasn't been done about Grush's claims that you wish, we would have? And how does that connect to this new UAP legislation?
Well, let's look, David Grush came forward and made some statements that are very important and advance the issue. But it's not like other people haven't made these claims. Plenty of people made these claims. But the timing and his position and everything was very powerful, and it helped advance it. Right? But the issue is much larger than that. So let me give you my latest version of my shtick, my spiel, which I'm prepared to give as many times as it takes. I'm going to try to get this message across one podcast at a time. All right, how am I going to say this? Look, right now, first of all, there's two things going on right now, and one of them has two parts. The first thing that's going on right now is going through an extraordinary political time in America. This is not normal. This is not typical, right? We've had some pretty exotic times in the past. I've lived through most of them. And some of them got kind of hairy. Nothing like this. All right. So this is very intense, extremely partisan to some degree. And that is happening. All right. And it's getting enormous amount of attention by the media. The media is utterly obsessed with it, particularly media that has political bias. And there's a lot of that. And so that is happening. And we're all watching it pretty well. But there's something else going on. And it involves the end of the truth embargo. All right. Now, the end of the truth embargo is close. And it involves two things. There's two things going on that are ending this embargo. And it's very confusing for people. And I take some responsibility for this. Okay. Here's what's going on. There is a disclosure, we'll call it a disclosure process, right? You could call it disclosure movement, right? And then there's a disclosure process and a disclosure movement. Two. Okay, well, what's going on here? What are you talking about, Bassett? What do you mean? Simple. There is a small d disclosure process underway that you could even call a movement. We'll call it the small d disclosure movement. It's been going on for 77 years. It picked up speed around the year 2000, right? It's had some, ups and downs, but overall, since 1947, there has been a study process of small d disclosure, the revealing and bringing forth of information about the extraterrestrial presence and everything attached to that. In other words, information is coming out. Some of it is it's coming from many different directions, including even the government, without question. So over these 77 years, the government's put a lot of stuff out. A lot of people don't realize how much. But of course, the people in our world, the people that are in part of the UAP activism and research have brought a lot of information out. The bringing forward of information is disclosure. It is disclosing information. That process has picked up, right? The amount of information that we're getting, right? The structure to get more is picking up, right? And that is a small d disclosure movement that is underway. There is another movement going alongside of it, and these two are synchronistic. The other movement is capital D disclosure. What is that?
Yeah,
it is the movement, the effort, the project, whatever the hell you want to call it, to get the confirmation of the extraterrestrial presence from the President of the United States. Period. Okay. That's what it is.
Interesting.
Okay. And that will either come from the President of the United States first, or it will come from the President after another one or two heads of state have done it. But one way or another, it's going to come from the President of the United States. That is capital D disclosure, right? Now, I understand it's confusing. And so when people sometimes people are talking about the disclosure process, me, for instance, I'm actually referring to capital D disclosure process, because that is it has its own track.
No, I get it.
You got it?
I get
it.
Yeah. I describe it differently, though, which is so let me get your take on this, and please continue. But I say the little d is just the basic disclosure, meaning we're not alone. They visited us. And then capital D disclosure is all the other stuff that comes with it, right? Like
I got to turn that on its head. I'll turn it.
Okay.
Small D disclosure is everything. Everything, every doc that's turned up, every book that's been written, every report, every MUFON study, everything that has been done to get information is small D disclosure. All right.
Okay.
And that's going to continue. And then capital D disclosure is the effort to get the president to confirm it. Now,
Sure.
the reason they're synergistic is obvious. All of the small D disclosure that has taken place, either from the government or because of research by MUFON or others, the documentaries, all in the UAP, ET, citizen science effort, journalists, everything that has come out over the years has obviously helped us get closer to the confirmation event, capital D disclosure. And it's also the case that once we have capital D disclosure, once the president does confirm the ET presence, can we all agree that the ability to get more small D disclosure, more information out sooner, obviously is extremely enhanced. And so they are synergistic. They are wound around each other. And this confusion is non-trivial, right? To the extent that people get this, it's going to be a lot easier for them to follow it, participate it, and support it, okay? And so there are people out there that are hell-bent to get more information. God bless them. There are people out there that are hell-bent to get this confirmation from the president. I'm one of them. God bless them. And there are people doing both. And that includes me, okay? And so the things I do helps to try to get information, but it is not, and get more information out, fine, and help others do it. The Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is all about helping to get more information out, right? But that is not the core of what I do. The core of what I do is to get to the place where the president can disclose. That is not just another thing. The confirmation of the ET presence, as I have said, and other people are now saying, will be the most important event in human history.
Sure.
No, I don't mean to diss the ancient Egyptians or whatever the hell went on back then. Okay, or even the 1800s, whatever. No, it's the most important event in human history. It is a huge deal. All right.
No, I agree.
It will change the world. Okay. So it's something that obviously we have to have. So that is the background for trying to tell you where we are now.
Before we get into where we are now, just let me just insert one little thing. Which, just to get your take on this as well, just while we're here, because otherwise I'll forget. Is it, if we're doing this sort of public, or this, right, what this little D disclosure is happening, we're having hearings, we're trying to get legislation passed, people are coming out, telling stories, books, documentary, all these things you said, interviews, right, whistleblowers coming forward, MUFON investigations. Won't people get that confirmation before the president? Does that make sense? Will there be a moment behind the scenes in government somewhere where people go, stop, we finally got the truth, now we need to present this to the president so he can tell the American people? Or how do you see that logistically working? Does that make sense, that press conference coming about?
Well, you've struck on the third element here. All right. Okay, so we've established that small D disclosures have been going on for 77 years. Okay, we've established that there is an effort, right, underway that's less known to establish the basis for the president to finally confirm this. And I use this analogy, okay, for almost 90 years, from 1875 all the way up to 1964, right? There's tons of people that knew we needed justice for people of color. We knew that there was an injustice in our society. They knew it had to be fixed, right? And they're doing all they can to fix it here, fix it there, whatever, get the message out. Fine. But obviously, that wasn't going to do it. It wasn't going to be enough. In order to actually make serious process, this need, this requirement, this goal of fairness and justice for all people in the United States, including people of color, had to be formalized. It had to be confirmed by law, right?
Sure.
It couldn't just be, well, if enough people feel it's the right thing to do, it'll all work out. No, it won't. You had to have the Civil Rights Act, right?
Sure.
In other words, there are things that, let me tell you, there's a lot of things that can only happen in this country if there is a confirmation and legislation behind it, right? People say, oh, no, you don't need it. The hell you don't. Okay.
That's interesting. So you think legislation will follow that confirmation event,
No.
as you put it, which I like.
No, confirmation will follow the legislation. Okay. Now, in the case of the civil rights situation, the prize was a piece of legislation.
Correct.
That is not the case with this issue, because this issue is quite different. And one of the reasons it's different from the civil rights movement was that the government did not go to enormous lengths for 90 years to somehow convince us there was no segregation. There was no injustice. Everything is fine. What are you talking about? Now, they didn't do that. They acknowledge there's a problem. This is different. The government has said there's no there there. All right. And that's why we have to have that confirmation. All right. Plus, the issue is of a magnitude. Think about it. Is there a more significant national security and or worldview changing thing than this? And so the idea that, I don't know, some undersecretary to the undersecretary is going to come out and say, yeah, it's all true and that's enough. No, it have to come from the head of state, and not just our head of state. Every head of state in this planet will, in short order, confirm the ET presence, including the UN and the Vatican. All right. So where are we there? Here's where we are. We're on the 1 yard line. We've been slogging up this field since 1947. It's been tough. Recently, we made it to the 1-2 yard line.
We're at the 1 yard line, you think?
That's right.
To score.
So score. Now, guess what happens in football when you get to the 1 or the 2 yard line? The other team digs in, right?
Quarterback really sneak.
Tough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, you're right.
That's right. That's what happens.
Everyone up on the line.
And so we've gotten the 1 yard line, and then the empire struck back, and it's pushed back, but it's not going to work. It's not going to be sufficient, but it has definitely slowed things down. However, it would not have been enough. In other words, the pushback to the disclosure, capital D disclosure movement, which was eventually championed by a number of members of Congress, including some of the most powerful, and 4 years of legislation that had never existed before, would have not worked if it wasn't for the political situation that is coinciding with it. All right. And so there were certain key decisions that needed to be made by certain key members of Congress. And I think they were prepared to make them. But things dragged on. And by the way, there were other events happening. The COVID was one. The awful war in the Ukraine was another. And then, just in case that wasn't enough, you've got a catastrophe in the Middle East. What can I say? All right. And so you take all of that, you combine that with the most unstable, unpredictable political situation in America. And so a lot of the key decisions that needed to be made by the right people were deferred because it's like, this is not the right time to make that
extenuating
move.
Circumstances. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And some of it was hardcore politics, meaning, I could do this, but it could result in my candidate losing the election. And so, I get it. All right. And people are concerned. Oh my God, and we've lost some battles. Okay. And the most famous one, of course, was the destruction of the Schumer amendment. That was not amendment, but act that was submitted to the 2024 bill. Okay. And so that was a setback. But guess what?
We're back.
We're back. We're back big time. And
it's the same, right? The bill is identical as far as I know.
It's not identical. However, it is essentially the same bill. It's tighter a little bit. It's not as long. And we're going to dive into that bill in a few minutes, okay?
Yeah.
And some people may go, "Oh God, Steve, don't do this." But no, we got to dive into this bill. All right. But let me quick give the history here. All right. Okay. Again, my job is to follow all this stuff all the time, and so but let me be clear. Most people cannot do that. Most people simply cannot follow all of this. They got lives to lead, kids to raise, God knows, and so they don't know, and that's okay. But I know. And my job is to tell other people, here is what is happening, because I've got the time to follow it, because you don't. All right.
Let's
And
do
in
it, baby.
rapid
Yeah.
order, here's what happens. This is what we were moving down the field. And what took us to the 1 yard line, right, really starts, well, I'm going to go with 2000 and I'm going to go with 2020, not 2017.
Oh, okay. 2020.
In rapid succession, legislation is passed. Marco Rubio passes a basic bill and it's signed in December of 2020. All right, gets things rolling. And then 1 year later, a second bill is passed and signed in December of 2021. And then a third bill is passed in 2022, the 2023 Act. Okay, bing, 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 bing. All right, that is happening. That is generating a lot of interest, a lot of media, huge amounts of media. I'll show you some of that in a minute. And so now we're moving. It's moving us toward that 1 yard line. We're picking up speed. All right. And then we come into 2023. Everybody knows there's going to be a fourth bill. It's going to be probably big. They don't know exactly what the details are yet, but they're waiting, right? They know it's coming. And it may be the bill to end bills. It may be the final piece. All right. But before that bill could get submitted, David Grush makes his move. Now, David Grush was internally known. His whole story was well known within government. It was known by the Senate Intel Committee. It was known by the Inspector General. It was known by the DOD. It was well known. And by and large, it was unassailable. But that didn't mean you couldn't harass him. It didn't mean you could get mad at him. It couldn't mean that you felt he was a traitor and threatened him. Okay. But it was known. My understanding is he was working with Ross Coulthard for a year before he did the interview. And so
Correct.
at the same time that he is trying to resolve his issues with the Inspector General and get the pressure off of them and the threats, he is already planning possibly to go public on this. Okay. And as I guess you could say a whistleblower. I think that he has described himself as that. He's one of the very few true whistleblowers that are out there. And so this is in the works for about a year, and almost no one that I know knew about it. I didn't know about it. Most everybody I did. That doesn't mean there weren't people that didn't know, but overall it was tightly held. You can understand why. And so before the bill could be introduced, the new bill, Grush makes his move. The timing is what it is. In other words, he gives the interview to Ross Coulthard on live June the 5th of last year.
Yeah.
And the article comes out in the debrief. Why it was timed then as opposed to later, who knows? But it happens. The bill had not been announced yet. All right. And so that is a huge event. There's no question about it. All right. Because it was the first time really that the idea of extraterrestrials, now called non-human, right? Non-humans, okay, was formally put into play by a true insider that was on the job. I think he had just left at some point he had left the task force. Arrow. And then, of course, it ends up being repeated under oath. But as of June the 5th, it is essentially out there and in play. It is a big deal. Okay, so that advanced things pretty quickly. Then the question was, what's going to happen next? All right. And so everybody's holding their breath because, or at least I am, because he drops this thing into the mix. It's huge. The White House apparently either didn't know it was coming, but they certainly hadn't said anything. Most of the Congress may not have known. The DOD must have known, but they didn't say anything. And so suddenly there it is. I'm sure that the DOD and everyone associated with the truth embargo was hoping he'd change his mind. It's like, yeah, think about it. Don't do it, Dave. Give us some time. We're working on this. But he didn't. He drops that in, creating a huge problem for everybody. Why? Because in the minds of an awful lot of people, including media, he just formalized the presence of non-human tech, non-human bodies. That essentially confirms Roswell. It confirms we're not alone. But the final piece of legislation wasn't done, right? There had not been the hearing that we must have. There had not been any hearing, right? The little things that had happened before were not hearings. They were briefings or somebody was called up on the Hill. There had not been a hearing since 1968. What in the hell is going to happen next? And so what happened was it obviously ratcheted up the time schedule for a lot of people. And some of those people were in the House of Representatives. So Tim Burchett, who had been speaking on this issue, right, which is also helping to advance the disclosure process because he is a sitting member of the House of Representatives. Tim Burchett had been very aggressive on this issue, had gone on a number of shows. He seized on the Grush situation immediately as we can get a hearing on this, right? This, I think we can get a hearing on it. And so one way or another, it was worked out that Grush would come in and testify to the subcommittee of the Oversight Committee that included Burchett, Mace, and Luna at least. And Gates wasn't on the committee, but he came in and put his 2 cents in. I don't know how that happened. One day, hopefully, they'll tell us who talked to who and how it was arranged. But I believe it was helpful that they were able to get Fravor and Graves to participate. So it wasn't just David, it wasn't just Grush sitting there.
Well, they had like 11 or more witnesses, right, that were supposed to testify, but Burchett said that, some of them got scared off.
That is possible. Okay, that is very possible. But the fact that they got at least 2 more to go was significant, very helpful. Okay,
sure. And
probably more would have been a mistake. All right, because
I think so too. I think the 3 was like perfect number, to be honest. It would have divided up their time, right? Is that what you mean?
And I mean no disrespect here, but the pathway to the president's confirmation was not going to go through a subcommittee of the House. Okay, that wasn't the pathway. But this clearly was going to be assisting in the small d disclosure. Okay. Because when he comes out to Ross Coulthart, when he gives the interviews that allows for the debrief article by Blumenthal and Kane, that's small d disclosure, isn't it? More information. And so when they decide to have that hearing, they bring him in and he gives that same testimony under oath. That's more small d disclosure, but it's impacting. It is affecting large d disclosure too. Okay. Sure. Okay. So that happened. Boom. Now that's June the 5th. So what happened after that is Burchett got together and put together what would be a very important hearing, the first since 1968. And that ultimately was held on the 26th of July. However, there were other people that had problems to deal with here. There were other people. The White House had a serious problem. The White House was more at risk of being brought into this. In other words, what if 18 reporters start asking questions in the White House briefing room? What about Grush? What about non-human bodies, non-human tech? Interestingly enough, they didn't. I think there was one, and Jean-Pierre deflected.
There was 1 or 2 questions. Yeah.
Because the White House cannot get into this now. They cannot get into this. And so they were probably white knuckling what is going to happen next. Okay, so the Senate also had a problem. Right? We have sponsored all this legislation. We got another one in the works. This guy's jumped the gun. What are we going to do? And the man that came in to save the day, right, was, and he'll go down in history for this, is Senator Chuck Schumer. Senator Chuck Schumer obviously watches the Coulthart interview, and he watches, he reads the debrief article. He's probably aware, I'm sure that he's aware that the House subcommittee, the Burchett's putting together a hearing, right? So he's almost informed for sure that there's some sort of hearing coming, okay? And that, of course, is going to take it to another level because Grush is going to come in and say everything right again under oath, and there's going to be a lot of people watching. So he moves aggressively. What he does is he comes out on the 14th of July, right? 39 days after Grush's testimony, but 12 days before the hearing that finally got held on the Oversight Committee. And he comes out and announces that he is going to be the one championing, along with Mike Rounds and others, the next legislation, and gets it announced ahead of the hearing in the House. Okay.
Yeah.
And this announcement is a bombshell. I mean, I am listening to this, and I cannot believe the bill that he and Rounds put together between the time that Grush speaks to Coulthard on the air and 39 days later when he announces it.
Did you know that announcement was coming, like that bill and all that, or the
No,
amendment to?
absolutely not. We
Oh,
knew there was
wow.
going to be something, but I didn't know it was going to be when, and I didn't know it was going to be that. So he announces the UAP Disclosure Act.
Yeah.
You don't think I want to sit down with Chuck Schumer and say, Senator, why did you put disclosure in the name of that act? I mean, could it have anything to do with something I said or Stephen Greer said or whatever?
That is interesting that disclosure is in the name. Yeah, I actually never thought about that. You're right.
A lot of people worked very hard to get that name into that bill.
That's a good point.
So he by doing that,
it's not like UFO investigation or something, it's like, no. Disclosure. You're right. That's interesting.
So he is acknowledging you and me and Ross Coulthard. He's acknowledging James Fox. He's acknowledging everybody that has been pursuing small D disclosure all these years by putting that. God bless him. I hope to thank him personally. And so he announces this act. He announces this, that, and everything else. And I'm going, this is it. This is it. This is the final.
You're celebrating, right, Steve? You're just like, yeah.
All this previous legislation was kind of getting things together, but this is it. This is what allows us to wrap this up. Now, but of course, a lot of people are misinterpreting what the wrap up means. But then I'm still listening, and then he drops this. I'm sitting there listening to this, going, "This is great. This is great. This is great. And this is great." And then he says this. He says, "Oh, and the bill will include." Legislatively, that the United States government has the power to exert eminent domain over any of that non-human tech or non-human bodies that David Grush was talking about. And I nearly fell out of my chair. I'm going, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I'm going, because
you almost dropped your pastrami sandwich.
Drop the pastrami. In other words, a lot of people don't understand how important that was. It's one thing to say, look, we're going to have this and we're going to set up this and we're going to set up that, okay, in order to get information, okay, with respect to this stuff that, that Grush has alluded to. But when he drops eminent domain into the bill, he's basically saying, oh, yeah, Grush is telling you the truth. We have non-human tech, and some of that is in the hands of defense contractors, and we want eminent domain over that non-human tech. He has confirmed it. He has confirmed Grush, and he has forced the hand of the defense contractors to react. And all of that happens on the 14th, and I'm going, whoa. Okay, now, 12 days later, they hold the hearing in the House. And, of course, Grush now repeats everything under oath. But the bill has already been announced, so it is a lot easier to deal with. In other words, if you're the White House and somebody is bugging you, like, what about this? What about that? I mean, look. The Schumer bill, right? Schumer bill, look, talk to him. They're going to get this resolved and blah, blah, blah. We can't address this. All right. So in other words, he's taken all the heat off of basically the White House and put it on the Senate. Right. And he's also validated Grush and so forth. It's a huge moment, one of the great political moments in history. So that moves us much closer to the 1 yard line. OK, so the language goes up on July 27th. And then the opposition brought in some 300-pound linemen, some really good. Yeah. They're top of the line linebackers, and said, you're not getting in the end zone, guys. No way. And so so we had this pushback. Everybody knows about it. They were able to take all the powers out of the bill so that what was left and passed was the basics, but without any power to do it. Okay? That's the best they could do. They could have tried to gut the whole bill, but they knew that would have been a mistake. And so they basically left that in, sort of conceding that, okay, we're buying some time. And keep in mind that there's an election also underway here. All right. Yeah. And so the Republicans and their constituents, which do happen to include many defense contractors, very well are saying, wait a minute, if this if this thing moves forward, if we don't sort of blunt this thing could all happen before the election. And let me be clear, if that bill had stood as planned, meaning it was going to be signed in December, okay, I think we would have had a full-blown Senate Intel Committee hearing, not one, but a week's worth with 10, 20, 30 witnesses. It would have blown the truth embargo sky high, and President Biden would have come forward in the East Room and ended the truth embargo. And if you're a Republican, you're not going to look at that as a good thing. You're not going to be looking at, is that going to hurt his chances to win the election? I don't think so. It probably locks him in to win the election. He just became the disclosure president. He's now announced the most significant information and confirmed it formally in history. And so there was probably some politics there. Hey, it's a political world. No problem.
Sure.
And so they pushed back and kind of stopped it. Okay. So, but Chuck outplayed them. Schumer outplayed them. He was playing four-dimensional chess. They were playing checkers. And so they gutted the bill. They congratulated themselves. Everybody's upset. And before they could, really serve the shrimp cocktails, Schumer goes back into the Senate floor with rounds and reads a statement into the record. And a lot of people don't understand that, but there's nobody else in that room except the cleaning people. He's just reading it in that camera because he's in the Senate chambers. It goes in the congressional record, and of course it goes public. And basically what he says is, we're not happy about this. We're upset with our Republican colleagues, but we're not done. We're coming back. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
And so the defense contractors are going, why didn't he just kind of, lay down, take a break, whatever? I mean, why is he so intense? Why is he? And they realize, oh my God, we were able to gut this for one of the reasons was it was part of the National Defense Authorization Act, right? And any efforts to push that too hard, you're not going to get the bill passed. They have got to pass the NDAA. Gave him leverage. What if he reintroduces it as a standalone bill? What if he brings it right back in verbatim as a standalone? The Senate's going to pass it, and then it's going to go to the House, not by itself, and we're going to have to do this all over again, right? We're going to have to go through the whole damn thing and get Johnson to block it. And so they're going, that's not good. And then somebody tapped them on the shoulder and said, by the way, you are aware that there's tons of witnesses that have come forward. You are aware that the Senate Intel Committee can hold a hearing anytime it wants. You can't stop that. The defense contractors can't stop that. It's not a democratic process. The chairman of the committee can hold that hearing anytime he wants. Who's that? Mark Warner. Mark Warner sponsored one of the legislations. And so the Senate Intel Committee could wrap this up any time it wants to, and they realize we're screwed. They're going, oh, shit, we're screwed. And it's still pretty early, okay? I mean, this all happened in October of last year. The election is still over a year away. And so they're thinking we're screwed. And so that's when they brought out the 400-pound linebacker and said, at this point, we're on the 1-yard line, right? And so they're going, and here's what they did. And they're going to answer for it. History is not going to be kind. Last ditch Hail Mary pass. Let's get very unhappy. Sean Kirkpatrick has already indicated he's going to leave Arrow. Let's get him to sign off at a completely bogus report saying that we've studied all this shit back to 47, which is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my life. And there's nothing really there. It's the Condon report of the 21st century. And then things will all shut down and we'll be fine. And that's what they did. And guess what? It completely blew up in their face. Why? Many reasons. But one thing is that when the Condon report was issued in 1969, no internet, no social media, no podcast army, no Twitter, no Facebook, no global communication system, which ripped that report to pieces. But it bought them a little bit of time. All right. And so what happens next is that they've managed to stall it long enough where Warner, who I know from my own sources, wants to have that hearing, that he felt it was too close to the election, right? It's getting too close to the election. This is so big. If it doesn't go well, my president will lose. I can't do, and so he can't pull the trigger. All right.
Yeah.
Now, I also learned that there were some other complications. Again, this is 1 yard line stuff. Okay, it gets tougher. He wanted to have a hearing, and obviously there are plenty of witnesses, but some of the most firsthand witnesses, okay, who the Grush was referring to, who were literally working on the ET tech, wouldn't come forward. And the reason they wouldn't come forward is that they didn't feel there was enough witness protection yet. And so they weren't willing to come forward yet. And given the political arena, you can imagine that the chances of getting a lot of, crap was even higher because it's been politicized. And so they wouldn't come forward. That's what he wanted. And so couldn't pull the trigger. And then as we move further and further, it's simply not going to be possible. Okay. So we're stuck on the 1 yard line. People are a little frustrated. And so I'm waiting to see what's going to happen. And it just happened. Right? The confirmation that 1, we're still on the 1 yard line, and 2, oh yeah, we're going to score this touchdown. And what was it that just happened? We were expecting something. And it happened on July the 11th when Schumer, or Mike Rounds, rather, remember I said about the fact that they figured out to their regret that they could put a standalone bill in any time?
Yeah.
Well, they said something similar. Rounds and Schumer, Rounds in the lead, put on the table on July the 11th, not an act as part of the NDAA, but a floor amendment to the NDAA called the UAP Disclosure Act, or the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act. It is up there right now. We're going to get into it in a couple of minutes. And it is essentially the original bill with just, it's just a little toned down. It's not as long. It's a little clearer, but it's basically the same bill. Now, Robert Garcia had already done something like that. He dropped some legislation into the House knowing it had no chance. But it wasn't that he thought there would be a bill in the House. It was just his way of telling the DOD their error report is a joke. And this is what I think of it. But this is serious. And so that bill is dropped on July the 11th. The reason the world isn't already all over this, and there's been almost no articles, and I track them all, is because of the events of 2 days later. All right. So the bill drops on the 11th, but before the press could even get on it, we had some new developments. This is the nature of life and history. And that has completely overshadowed all of this and changed a lot of things. And the political situation is more dynamic than ever. And let me be clear, disclosure from a president of the United States is absolutely on hold. That doesn't mean we're not still on the 1 yard line. We are. All right. And so
we're running out of downs here.
I don't think so. I think no, there's downs are not in play. And so so what I want to do now is I want to take a tour for your audience of the new disclosure amendment.
That
has been submitted by Rounds. And so they can get appreciation of how significant it is.
Okay.
And so I'm going to go into present mode. I'm going to go into share screen. I'm going to go and where is it? Okay. I think I got to go here. Okay. Let me see if that works. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. Let me know if this is coming up okay. All right.
Let's see.
All good?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what dropped on July 11th. Not that long ago. Notice amendment, not act. Very important. It makes it a lot more difficult to screw with.
Okay.
It's Senate Amendment 2610 to the Senate bill, meaning the NDA bill 4638. Now, let's go back down. Mr. Rounds for himself and Mr. Schumer, so that everybody knows this is Schumer and Rounds. Okay, undoubtedly with the assistance of, well, not too much assistance because basically they already wrote the damn bill, right? Submitted an amendment intended to be proposed by him to the bill 4638 to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2025 for military activities of the Department of Defense, for military construction, and for defense activities, the Department of Energy, to prescribe military personnel, strengthen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the NDAA. Okay? It's called a division, right? Don't ask me why, it just is. Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure is the name of the division. The title of the act, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act of 2024, or the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024. Now, just quickly in the findings, because they're important, right? What these are is essentially the things that are justifying doing this at all. Findings and declaration. Congress finds and declares the following. Notice, Congress finds all federal government records related to unidentified anomalous phenomena. And by the way, I'm going to use UAP going forward. I'm not going to use the whole phrase, but that's what I'm referring to. And by the way, also, in the evolution of the language, and this was intentional, a lot of effort was put into getting from UFO to UAP, because UAP is not stigmatized, easier for the politicians, the journalists to speak to the issue and not have to use the dreaded UFO. And it worked, okay? Once it was in play, however, as the legislation moved forward, they changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomena. One, because it is more than just aerial phenomena, and they wanted to be accurate, okay? And it just so happened that anomalous was an A. And so it stayed UAP. I love it. And so that's the phrase, and that, frankly, is what everybody should be thinking as they go forward. Should be preserved and centralized for historical and federal government purposes. 2, all federal government records concerning UAP should carry a presumption of immediate disclosure, and all records should be eventually disclosed to enable the public to become fully informed about the history of the federal government's knowledge and involvement surrounding UAP. Can that be any clearer? 3, legislation is necessary to create an enforceable, independent, and accountable process for the public disclosure of such records. Again, that's small d disclosure. Legislation is necessary because credible evidence and testimony indicates that federal government UAP records exist that have not been declassified or subject to mandatory declassification review as set forth in Executive Order 13526. Note, relating to classified national security information, due in part, and this is very important, due in part to exemptions under the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, 42 U.S.C. 2011, as well as an overbroad interpretation of transclassified foreign nuclear information, which is also exempt from mandatory declassification, thereby preventing public disclosure under existing provisions. Let me explain. Now, some of the researchers in our field have talked about this. They've written about it. All right, and it comes up from time to time, but it's one of those more esoteric aspects that most people, they don't get it, whatever the hell, and they move on. But here is what's at point here. One of the ways the U.S. government has been able to manage the extraterrestrial phenomena issue and tech and records and everything else is by sticking it in the atomic and in the energy section and getting it filed under the Atomic Energy Act, because that act and the other matter are exempt. It gives them more exemption from, examination, investigation, and certainly Freedom of Information Acts. Clever, but they've been outed now. Not just by some researcher, they've been outed by the United States Senate. 5, legislation is necessary because Section 552 of Title V United States Code, commonly referred to as Freedom of Information Act, as implemented by the executive branch of the federal government, has proven inadequate in achieving the timely public disclosure, that's small d, of government unidentified or UAP records that are subject to mandatory declassification review. Well, guess who is smiling who smiled broadly when he read that paragraph. And I'm talking about, obviously, John Greenwald Jr. If anybody knows about the difficulties of getting FOIA stuff from the government, or through the government through FOIA on this matter, John Greenwald is the leading world expert, and I am sure he is thrilled about that. 6, legislation is necessary to restore proper oversight over UAP records by elected officials in both the executive and legislative branches of the federal government that has otherwise been lacking as of the enactment of this act. Otherwise been lacking. They're acknowledging that the government has been inappropriately, and the Congress denied the proper oversight, which, of course, my people have been telling them for about 35 years. Okay. 7, legislation is necessary to afford complete and timely access to all knowledge gained by the federal government concerning UAP in the furtherance of comprehensive, open, scientific and technological research and development essential to avoiding or mitigating potential technological surprise in furtherance of urgent national security concerns and public interest. Notice how carefully that is written.
Sure.
What is saying there is that science, the world's scientists and technologists have been denied the ability to engage this science so that we could really make some hay, right? It's limited to a defined group of government people and or defense contractors. And 2, right, technological surprise in furtherance of urgent national security concerns refers to, of course, technological developments from ET tech in the hands of other countries that have decided to weaponize it.
Yeah.
Notice there is no reference to technological surprise from ETs themselves. In other words, they've assiduously avoided referring to national security risk of the attack of the aliens. That is important and not accidental. Under that B, purposes. The purposes of the division are to provide for the creation of the unidentified anomalous phenomena records collection of the National Archives and Record Administration, to require the expeditious public transmission to the archivist of public disclosure of these records. Now, understand, there is no way that those things can be passed through the archive to the archivist without the entire world knowing what they are. Okay, so what they've just said is, we're going to reveal everything. All right, everything about this. Then the question is, how is that process going to be undertaken? And what is going to be the time frame? All right. So I don't see how clear they could be, all right, about this. Now here is the subtle twist to this that I have pounded away on more podcasts than I can ever, do, but than you can imagine. But I have no choice, right? I got to do this one podcast at a time. And this is what people need to understand. As they read this bill, all right, they're thinking, oh, wow. They might be thinking that, wow, the government is going to figure out what's going on here. Right? They're going to go get secret records and stuff, and they're going to be able to figure it out. Meaning people in the government that don't know, like maybe the president, right? Or the CIA or something, because those things have been hidden, right? Hidden, in the Atomic Energy Act, underneath that, whatever. And then we're going to be able to find this out. No, that's not what it's about at all. All of this is about disclosure, capital D. The other movement, the one that I told you about, that's been simultaneously going along together with small d disclosure. Obviously, this bill is about small d disclosure. It's about bringing stuff out like crazy. Yeah. But they haven't confirmed the ET presence yet, have they?
It's all about records at this point, right? If you, the wording of the legislation, it's all about records that our government may have, which doesn't really insinuate anything, right? That doesn't infer anything. That just means we could have a record of a sighting. We made a document. We want that document.
Well, not exactly. Because if you do a search on this document, you will find non-human technology is referred to 40 times.
No, for sure. 40 times. Wow.
And unidentified is mentioned 140 times, and non-human tech 20 times. Subpoena is mentioned 2 times. And what's the other one? I'll think of it in a second. So no, it's about a lot more than records, right? I assure you. And so, okay, that is a pretty clear message. All right. Now, as you go further into this, you get into I got to finish my point. So, okay. So if the government, if the White House knows there's an ET presence, and I assure you they do, if all of the agencies, the 18 intelligence agencies know there's an ET presence, and I know they do, sure they do. If the 35 departments of the Pentagon know there's an ET presence, and quite a few people on the Hill, then what in the hell is the point of all this? It's this. It is setting up for disclosure itself by the president. The president cannot simply get up one morning and decide it's time for the people to know the truth, call a press conference, get those people in here. I'm going out there and I'm telling, hey, we got ETs here. No way. This is far too significant, far too important. The implications are too enormous. And the chaos, but the intensity of the public and the journalist after that announcement is going to be off the charts. And so it has to be done responsibly. In other words, you've got to set up the structures, the organization. You've got to get a lot of people informed, preferably behind the scenes and privately, so that the department, the DOD is ready, the armed services are ready, the Congress is ready, the legislation is ready, and then the president can come forward and disclose. So it's about capital D disclosure, but they can't say that. I mean, they've gone as far as they can go. My God, I mean, how? But they can't say in the opening section here, this act is being proposed for and as amendment to the 2025 NDAA, because we are up to our keister in extraterrestrials, and we need to start getting the information out about that. They cannot do that, and so
that second definition is interesting. Close observer.
Sure, they got all kinds of cool data. Let's go to the definition. Sure. Archivist, we know what that is. Close observer. The term close observer means anyone who has come into close proximity to an unidentified anomalous phenomena or non-human intelligence. Okay, interesting. How would they come? And here's an interesting thing. How would somebody come into close proximity of non-human intelligence? Can you guess?
Well, there's a million ways. Not a million, but a lot of different ways.
Well, I mean, if they happen to land and they're out there, picking flowers, and you cruise on up and go, hey, what are you guys doing here? I guess you've had, close proximity. But guess who has a whole lot of close proximity to extraterrestrials? Contactees.
Yeah,
they can't say that.
Sure.
You notice they can't say that, right? Because that issue is not on the table yet. That's, again, part of the process, the capital D disclosure process.
So you think close observer is them masking the term abductee?
Well, I mean, if you're up close to an ET craft, like the guys that render from Stars, that's close
I
observer.
get what you're saying. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But
they added
like
or
UAP.
non-human intelligence. They didn't have to add that. They could have just said unidentified anomalous phenomena. And so by adding or non-human intelligence, this is the way that Schumer and Rounds are indirectly, for your contactee, letting you know, we haven't forgotten.
It's just crazy when you think about it is like a big deal, like you're saying, like you're getting at. It really is. These terms, this who's behind it, who's pushing it. It is quite interesting, to say the least.
God, yeah, it's a big deal,
right? Like it really is. No, it kind of is like, before this happened, what people were wanting to see in some legislation, some of these terms and some of these things, and it be taken seriously. So, no, I get it. Yeah, some of these terms I think the definitions are super important to help understand what they mean when they say certain things in the bill, right? So,
of course,
close observer is a good one.
They don't have to use non-human intelligence. They could say extraterrestrial. but they realize that's not going to help, and there is the possibility that they're interdimensional. Now, this is obviously absurd, but in a sense, it gives them a bit of a license to go there. But extraterrestrial is not going to help get this bill passed. So they say this. They can't refer to contactee, so they put it in that context. Look, some people are offended by that. But hey, guess what? Governance is the art of compromise and language. And so if this gets the job done, that's what we got to do. So let's go on. Collection. The term collection means UAP records. Controlled disclosure campaign plan. The term controlled disclosure campaign plan, which is different than the original one.
Okay.
But it's left this. It means the controlled disclosure campaign required by Section 9. Controlling authority. Now, this is important. The term controlling authority, which, and there's a lot of them. And the reason this is important is the controlling authority means that you're an authority that's got your hands on stuff. You got the record, you got a little tech, you got some ETs in the basement, whatever the hell, right? And so who are they? Well, federal, state, or local government department, offices, agencies, committee, commission, commercial company, academic institution, or private sector entity in physical possession of technologies of unknown origin or biological evidence of non-human intelligence. That pretty much covers it all, but it particularly is important that they included private sector entity. Okay. Director. The director of the office.
What does that mean, private sector entity? Like, are they saying like people, just a average person?
No, people or corporations. Entity means both people and corporations. They clarify that later.
Okay. Got it.
But entity covers a lot, right? I don't care what you are. Okay.
Sure.
Nonprofit, for profit, whatever.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Sole proprietor.
They're just trying to cover all the bases. Basically, anyone who's got an ET craft or ET. Right. We for sure.
You're a controlling authority. And that means every time we refer to controlling authority in this act, that's you, baby.
Referring to them. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Executive agency means an executive agency as defined in Section 52. Government office. The term government office means any department, office, agency, committee, or commission of the federal government and any independent office or agency without exception that has possession or control, including via contract or other agreement of UAP records. In other words, everybody.
Yeah.
No exceptions. Okay.
Sure.
Identification aid. It means written description prepared for each record. Leadership of Congress. Very important. So in the bill, when they say leadership of Congress, this is who they're referring to. This is not trivial. The majority leader of the Senate, that's Schumer right now.
Yeah.
The minority leader of the Senate, Rubio. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Johnson. The minority leader of the House of Representatives, Jeffries. Okay. And legacy program. Oh boy, what's that? The term legacy program means all federal, state, and local government, commercial, industry, academic, and private sector endeavors to collect, exploit, or reverse engineer technologies of unknown origin or examine biological evidence of living or deceased non-human intelligence that predates the date of the enactment. And folks, when they say living or deceased non-human intelligence, they are not referring to killer whales, elephants, very smart monkeys, or your dog. Okay, just keep that in mind. National Archives, that's given. Non-human intelligence. The term non-human intelligence means any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be presumed responsible for UAP phenomena or of which the federal government has become aware. That's it. That's the whole.
They must have taken forever to come up with that, to make sure that's the definition they're going to use. I can't imagine that had to have been one of the more important parts. Was that?
Well, keep in mind the language for all of this actually starts all the way back in 2023, right? So this is the second time around, and I think they've
the same
it.
definition. I think they refined it. That's what I mean. I think it's a little more refined, though. From what I remember, the
original Schumer bill, which was gutted, is linked on my website. You can go read that. And you could compare the two. I may put them side by side. There's, I'm barely keeping up here. Let's see. Prosaic attribution. This is important. The term, again, it's an interesting phrase. The term prosaic attribution means having a human, either foreign or domestic origin, and operating according to current proven and generally understood scientific and engineering principles and established laws of nature, and not attributable to non-human intelligence. In other words, our stuff, okay, which means that if you're doing an investigation, you are in many cases going to arrive at a prosaic attribution, meaning it's human in origin, okay? And if you don't, and it's not human. Public interest. This is important. Public interest means the compelling interest in the prompt public disclosure of UAP records for historical and government purposes, and for the purpose of fully informing the people of the United States about the history of the federal government's knowledge and involvement surrounding unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP. By the way, they keep mentioning history in this. This is important. Why? Because when they say history, they're talking about all the way back to Roswell, Foo Fighters, anything that got picked up from a 33 crash in Italy, and everything else. It's not just, last couple of years. The works, which is, of course, the way it should be. Record. Again, records are dominant here, but everybody knows that the tech is there too, but there's more records than there is tech, okay? They may have 7, 8, 9 crash vehicles. They've got rooms full of records. Record. The term record includes a book, paper, report, memorandum, directive, email, text, or other form of communication, or map, photograph, sound, or video recording, machine-readable material, computerized, digitized, or electronic information, including intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and target acquisition sensor data, regardless of the medium in which it was stored, or other documentary material, regardless of its physical form or characteristics. It's important. Why? Because they're basically saying it's everything. We're not leaving something out, right? There's almost nothing that's not included in 17. Again, a pretty powerful message to everyone. So 18, review board. This is important. Remember, that was a key matter that was taken out of the, stripped out of the last bill.
100%.
It's back. The term review board means on a UAP records review board established by Section 07. We'll get to that. Technologies of unknown origin. This
is one right here. Yeah.
The term technologies of unknown origin means any materials or metamaterials, ejecta, crash debris, mechanisms, machinery, equipment, assemblies or sub-assemblies, engineering models or processes, damaged or intact aerospace vehicles, and damaged or intact ocean, surface, and undersea craft associated with a UAP, or incorporating science and technology that lacks prosaic attribution or known means of human manufacture. Okay?
Interesting.
Pretty straightforward. They don't leave anything out. 20, temporarily non-attributed objects. This is basically unknowns that cannot be resolved one way or the other. This is a legal term. Temporarily non-attributed objects means the class of objects that temporarily resist prosaic attribution. Remember that? Meaning human origin, by the initial observer as a result of environmental or system limitations associated with the observation process that nevertheless ultimately have an accepted human origin or known physical cause. Although some UAP may at first be interpreted as temporarily non-attributed objects, they are not temporarily non-attributed objects, and the two categories are mutually exclusive. They are not.
I guess I am confused by that.
Yeah, I think that's a typo. Okay, no problem. Inclusion, the term temporarily non-attributed objects includes natural, celestial, meteorological, and undersea weather phenomena. Okay, no big deal.
Interesting. Okay.
Now we go on, and it goes on to list. Let's see. They're getting into all of that. Okay, they're describing this whole thing about temporarily non-attributed. And let's see what these are: mundane, human-made airborne objects, cluttered debris, federal, state, local government, commercial industry, academic, private sector, aerospace platforms, known foreign systems. Okay, they're just listing all the likely candidates, right?
Correct.
That might be seen as possible UAP, but they're temporarily unidentified. In general, the term UAP means any object operating or judged capable of operating in outer space, the atmosphere, ocean surfaces, or undersea, lacking prosaic attribution due to the performance characteristics and properties not previously known to be achievable based upon commonly accepted physical principles. UAP are differentiated from both attributed and temporarily non-attributed objects by one or more of the following observables. Lou Elizondo probably will enjoy this. Instantaneous acceleration, absent apparent inertia. Hypersonic velocity, absent thermal signature and sonic shockwave. Transmedium, such as space to ground and air to undersea travel. Positive lift, contrary to known aerodynamic principles. Multispectral signature control, physical or invasive biological effects to close observers and the environment. Inclusions, the term UAP includes what we were previously described as, I love this, flying discs, flying saucers, unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified flying objects, the only time this is in this act, and unidentified submerged objects, USOs. Unidentified anomalous phenomena record. The term UAP record means a record that is related to UAP phenomena, UAP, technologies of unknown origin or a non-human intelligence, and all equivalent subjects by any other name with the specific and sole exclusion of temporarily non-attributed objects. That was created or made available for use by, obtained by, or otherwise came into the possession of everybody. The Executive Office of the President, Department of Defense and its progenitors, the Department of the War, Department of Navy, Department of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, specifically the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the Department of Energy and its progenitors. This is a very important one for the reasons we mentioned. The Manhattan Project, the Atomic Energy Commission, and the Energy Research and Development Administration, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Central Intelligence Agency and its progenitor, the Office of Strategic Services, the NRO, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, the FBI, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Presidential Library, the Executive Agency, Independent Officer Agency, and any other department, office, agency, committee, or commission of the federal government. Any state or local government, department, office, agency, committee, or commission. And finally, X, any private sector person or entity formally or currently under contract or some other agreement with the federal government. And that means all of the defense contractors and God knows who else. Okay.
I think they have everything covered there.
Everything covered.
Right.
Which now,
I didn't see the Coast Guard on there. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
You know, it might have been missed. We should talk to them.
Right.
So here we go. Okay. That we haven't got to the bill. So this is the definitions of the bill. And those alone should tell a reasonable person we are on the 1 yard line. Okay. Okay. So now let's quickly breeze through a couple of these. This is section 04. This is very important. In general, under establishment, not later than 60 days after the date of the enactment of this act, which will be, let's see, early in 2025. I don't think it's right on the signing. I forget when it starts, but I believe it's fiscal year 2025. So we're talking about January. We're only about 6 months away. The archivist shall, no later than 60 days, shall commence establishment of the collection of records in the National Archives to be known as the UAP Records Collection. In other words, they're setting up the space, the structure, everything that's needed to receive. Okay? Okay. In carrying out subparagraph A, the archivist shall ensure the physical integrity and original provenance, meaning where it came from, or if indeterminate, the earliest historical owner of all records. The collection shall consist of records, copies of all government-provided or government-funded records relating to UAP, technologies of unknown origin, non-human intelligence, or equivalent subjects by any other name with the specific and sole exclusion of temporarily non-attributed objects, which shall be transmitted, and so forth, and so forth. Okay? So they're talking about...
Is the archivist going to be one person or an office of people?
Well, they're talking about the National Archives, which has as its head the archivist, but they're referring obviously to the archives. But the archivist will be the lead.
I wonder how many people they'll put on this.
As many as necessary. Okay, so let's see. So we're going to go all. This is all all about that. Not to just go down to section 5. Review, identification, transmission to the National Archives, and public disclosure of UAP records by government offices. Oh, okay. Here's important. A, identification, organization, preparation, subsection 1. In general, as soon as practicable, after the date of the enactment of this act, each head of a government office shall identify and organize records in possession of the government office or under control of the government office relating to UAP. And B, prepare such records for transmission to the archivist for inclusion in the collection. 2, prohibitions. Okay. No UAP record shall be destroyed, altered, or mutilated in any way. That is very important. Okay.
Yeah.
B, no unidentified UAP record made available or disclosed to the public prior to the date of the enactment of this act may be withheld, redacted, postponed for public disclosure, or reclassified. Okay. Okay. No UAP record created by a person or entity outside of the federal government, excluding names or identities consistent with the requirements of Section 06, shall be withheld, redacted, postponed for public disclosure, or reclassified. Custody of UAP records pending review. During the review by the heads of government offices under subsection C and pending review activity by the review board, very important, each head of a government office shall retain custody of the UAP records of the office for purposes of preservation and security. They're laying it right on the head of that office, meaning if you don't do that, you're going to have some serious problems. The review board requires the physical transfer of records for purposes of conducting an independent, impartial review. So remember, the purpose of the review board is an independent, impartial review to decide, will the record or whatever material can go forward to the archives, and obviously be fully revealed to the world, or withheld for reasons that are legitimate and set forward in the act. Review by heads of government offices, in general, not later than 300 days after the date of the enactment of this act, meaning sometime in 2025. Each head of a government office shall review, identify, and organize each UAP record in the custody or possession of the office. That means that by the end of 2025, somewhere around October, the entire cache of records in the entire government will have already, should have been, identified and organized. And we're only in October of 2025.
Wasn't there some of this included in last year's? Like, aren't some records going to come out this October?
That is possible. I'll have to review it, but if it's being restated here, it's because probably nobody's doing anything. In other words, they're going, I don't think so. Sure. Remember, they took the powers out of that bill. So, and they're doing this, right, for disclosure to the public, review by the review board, transmission to the archivist, requirements in carrying out paragraph 1, the head of government office shall determine which of the records of the office are UAP records, determine which of the UAP records of the office have been officially disclosed or made publicly available in a complete and unredacted form. C, determine which of the UAP records of the office or particular information contained in such a record was created by a third agency or by another government office, meaning you got it, but it was created elsewhere. And goes on and on. That's pretty good. A lot going on here. It's all about the records. It's thorough.
Let's pick like one more thing from this, because this is going to be really intense for a lot of people. We've spent a lot of time like on this document.
That's fine. I'm going to wrap it up pretty quickly. Section 6 is important. It's the grounds for postponement. In other words, some stuff may be held back, but remember, it's part of a relatively transparent process.
And they have to explain why or something, right?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So, disclosure of UAP records or particular information in UAP records to the public may be postponed subject to limitations of this division if there is clear and convincing evidence. And it goes and lists the usual things. Okay, and people say, well, there you go. They're going to use all of this to hide it. Now, because remember, it's a process that is transparently taking place. The review board is getting this stuff. There's 9 people on that review board. And so if they see that they are concocting false bases for withholding it, they can step in and kick some butt. So I'm not concerned
I see
about
what
that.
you're saying. If the reasons they start giving, hey, we can't give the records for X reason, they could be like, nope, this isn't enough.
That's
They
right.
essentially have to, make their case for why X records can't be given, and they're also not permitted to destroy any records as well.
Okay.
Right.
Then it goes into the review board. Very important.
It's okay.
It says they're going to establish a review board. They talk about who can be nominated, how it's going to be done. And they say the president shall make nominations to the review board after considering persons recommended by the following: Senate Majority Leader, Senate Minority Leader, House Speaker, House Minority Leader, Secretary of Defense, National Academy of Sciences, and established nonprofit research organizations relating to unidentified anomalous phenomena. And one of those is going to be the New Paradigm Institute, funded and growing and chaired by Danny Sheehan.
Oh, nice.
The American Historical Association, such other persons and organizations as the president considers appropriate. So they are going to get input from civilian entities. And I think I have given you enough to let you to confirm, I think, any reasonable person why we're on the 1 yard line, as this bill is going to sit there for months being read by people all over the world. Okay. And let me mention, this. Okay.
Oh, you got one more thing.
This in section, in that lower section, it's talking about the ability of the review board to do its job,
Sure.
and it points out that
Subpoena power.
They can request the Attorney General to subpoena private persons to compel testimony, records, and other information relevant to its responsibilities under this division. It also says that it can hold hearings, administer oaths, and subpoena witnesses. That, of course, and if they hold hearings, I mean, they could be review board holding the hearing. That would be interesting, but that certainly includes the Senate. But in other words, subpoena powers are back here, and of course, and so forth. And then down the line, if you go far enough, it points out that the office arrow will receive, in order to enact this legislation, $20 million is appropriated for that purpose.
To Arrow.
So, I'm not sure if it's the Arrow. It may be for multiple and so forth. So
got it.
This is the bill. All right. Let's see. Okay. They also repeal some of the Defense Authorization Act 2024 for probably various reasons, because it's in contradiction. And in Section 14, we authorize to be appropriated to carry out the provisions of this division, $20 million for fiscal year. One way that they could diminish this bill amendment in order to get it passed is to say, that's too much. Why don't we just appropriate $5 million? But here's the most important thing. Look, we're going to have a new Congress in a few months. 2/3 of the Senate is not going to change. Yeah, there's going to be 435 elections for the House. Most of the seats are not going to change. It is possible that the control may change. But if the Senate goes to the Republicans, the Senate Intel Committee will be run by Marco Rubio, who's already on board on this issue. If the House switches over to the Dems, then you've got Jeffries. There's no indication whatsoever there's any problem there. But if it stays in the Republican hands, it'll still be the Majority Leader Johnson. However, the House is actually ahead of the Senate on this issue, and you've got quite a few members of the House jumping into this issue. And I can assure you, as this moves forward, there's going to be more. There is an informal UAP caucus, but it needs to be formalized. But they have put together what amounts to sort of a Zoom version, but still, they're going to expand that. And so, as of, if this bill is passed, it will be passed and signed by December by the current president. And then the question is, will they try to gut it again? I think they're going to have a real hard time, frankly. And we will then enter 2020, and this bill will take effect. And it will be up to the president. It'll be up to the Senate to hold the hearing after the election and after the new president has taken the White House. You're not going to do it. I would be surprised if they did it in the transition, but there is 100 days, and the Senate could call the hearing. This act will have been passed. It may not be in effect yet, but it will have been passed. And then the Senate could hold a hearing in that transition, and the bill and the disclosure could come from President Biden. Or, and this is what is more likely, they will pass it. It will go into effect. And then disclosure is going to come from the next president of the United States. And that will not be President Biden. That's where we are. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what people need to understand. And if you don't read a bill like this in its entirety, you're not going to get it. And I understand that. But you're on the 1 yard line. There are some people that are frustrated and they're walking off the field. I get it. But if you walk off the field, folks, when this touchdown is made, you're not going to be able to celebrate with us in the locker room with the champagne and the great hors d'oeuvres and stuff.
Really, I would just say whatever your final thoughts are on all this, we'll just sort of.
I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that. But what can I say? I ask people to be patient. Obviously, I want them to support this amendment. It's still going to be several months before there's going to be a decision to that amendment is going to be submitted. By then, we will know the 2 presidential candidates. Both of the nominations will be made. The conventions will be over. The campaign will be in full flourish. It will be intense, very, very intense. And this will be kind of just sitting there. And then the question is, will it be passed as an amendment, floor amendment, to the Senate bill? And then, right, will it be, well, actually, the Senate could actually hold a vote on that amendment much earlier. So I'm not sure when that'll happen, but it'll be earlier than the final reconciliation. So who knows? It could be weeks from now or whatever, but it'll pass. And then the question is, what will happen in the reconciliation between the House and the Senate at the end of the year? It is, in fact, an amendment to the NDAA. If it gets blocked again, then Schumer will almost certainly reintroduce it after the election, and maybe even the new president takes as a standalone bill. Sure. So he's not going to give up. He's utterly committed this. He's going to end this embargo, and the Senate Intel Committee is going to have to hold the hearing that is essential. And let me just mention this. The reason the hearing is so important is that, 1, it's formal. 2, it allows many important witnesses, not just Grush, to testify under oath, right? That's very powerful. It will be watched by millions of people, very powerful, right? Not just in the US, but around the world. And so it just brings it all out there. It's going to be clear and obvious to everybody. And then the president can step forward based on the hearing and not just how he felt on a given day, right? And acknowledge the power of the testimony, indicate that they've made some inquiries and decided that it must be confirmed, and confirms and announces we're not alone, whatever you want to call it. We're being visited by something. Yeah. And that is about as non-political as it can get. That doesn't mean it won't be politicized to some degree. It's about as non-disruptive as it can get. Now, the fact that the president who steps forward in the East Room and says, I watched this hearing, it's clear we're not alone. The fact that that president doesn't mean that president didn't know it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And people will ask that question. They will say, look, when did you know this? Well, the president might say, well, personally, I kind of suspected it, whatever. There's going to be a certain level of kind of residual mendacity that's going to take place because this is just so awkward, right? You're ending a 77-year lie that not you. Most of the originators are all dead. The recent people were just doing their jobs, but it is awkward. But once they get over that, once they've finally just done it, they're going to be surprised how generous I think American people are with the fact that, well, they couldn't just come out. They needed to get this structure in place. Because once that announcement, and by the way, another reason why they got to get it done is that the problem the U.S. government's going to face will be just as bad if they don't have all this done, if the president says it, as if another head of state says it. And so if we haven't done this legislation, if we haven't set up Arrow, if we haven't done all this prep and all this engagement and inform the members of Congress, then if Xi Jinping comes forward and just ends this embargo on a Monday, the next day the U.S. government is in a terrible place. What is it going to do? I mean, it's got nothing, right? No legislation, no Arrow, no nothing. It's just answering a zillion questions, all of which are going to be tough, and the answers are going to be awful, and the U.S. government's going to look like it's going to look bad. And so I've been telling them this for 20 some years. I've given interview after interview when I've said, guys, it's mostly guys down there at the DOD, you do know that there are other heads of state in this world that, unless they're on your payroll, can disclose it tomorrow. Are you ready for that? And their answer has been, it's not going to happen. They're not going to do it. Whatever. They have gotten away with murder. And the closer we get, the more likely another head of state may say, hey, I'm jumping in here. But if another head of state does that now, we are ready. We've got everything pretty much we need to deal with the demand of several hundred million Americans. I want everything. I want it tomorrow. I want it absolutely clean. I want everybody that doesn't do this correctly to go to jail, whatever. Right?
Sure.
They are basically ready for that, even if Xi Jinping comes forward. But we still need that legislation. That would be nice. And I would like to see our president go first.
100%. Look, it's definitely going to be an exciting, months ahead. There's no doubt about that on a lot of different fronts. So yeah, man, I'm definitely curious to see how this is going to play out, and hopefully it plays out like it's meant to, and we can get to that big D disclosure like you're talking about. I think everybody wants that. So, well, look, Steve, this has been a great conversation, man. I like leaving it that there's always something else to talk about. So don't worry, we'll definitely have you on again and continue this conversation, especially as we get into the nitty gritty and we get closer to some of these decisions starting to happen. So I really appreciate coming on and breaking a lot of this down for us, and, helping better understand what exactly is at stake and what is at play.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to edit some of it out if you feel you know how to shorten it. I won't be offended. Now, before we leave, a couple quick promos. Look, HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. All right, check it out.
I'll put the link in the description for sure.
If you are somebody with a substantial time and grade in the film content business or in the UAP ET area, you think you'd like to be a founding member, there's a means to contact us to discuss that. The Paradigm Research Group is just about to get its 501c3 status and will be going out as a full nonprofit seeking funding so it can be involved in this disclosure process more aggressively. There's a cruise coming up that Danny Sheehan and I, Paul Hynek, and many others in Grant Cameron are going to be on. It's a little 7-day cruise from Seattle to Alaska and back. It's called Contact at Sea. If you want to join us, check it out. Tell them Steve sent you. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's coming up. The New Paradigm Institute right now is in fuego. It's got so many projects going, I can't count them. It is, in fact, the lead organization, as far as I'm concerned, in the quote capital D disclosure process, and one of the most prepared organizations for the post-disclosure world. So I do want to mention that. And so there's my promos for today.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I totally support all of that. I'll put links in the description to everything, Steve, as always, so people can definitely follow up on it and check it out. Yeah, I love what you're doing. I so enjoy our conversations, and I can't wait for the next one. Again, as we get into the nitty gritty, I feel like you said, we're on the one yard line here. So as we start pushing forward, I look forward to more conversations.
Thanks, Patrick. Ad Astra to you and all your followers.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.